When I learnt that a new book by Richard Williams was about to be published, I immediately knew that this was something I had to get my hands on. Richard Williams was a multi-Oscar winning animator and director, as well as the author of the classic animation guidebook, The Animator's Survival Kit. A book so popular that you are unlikely to find a professional animator who doesn't own a copy. Upon opening this new book, Adventures in Animation, I was intrigued to discover what new insights I might find. Would this book add to the vast wealth of animation knowledge which had already been shared within the Animator's Survival Kit? And would it find a permanent home in my collection? The fact that this book was to be released at all caught me off guard, because Richard Williams sadly died in August of 2019, aged 86. I was aware that he'd been working on new animation at the time, but the last thing I was expecting was that 5 years on, a new book would be published. The key to this new book is that it was a combined effort between Richard Williams and his wife Imogen Sutton. While started together, the book was ultimately completed following his death. This becomes even clearer since the early pages of the book and a number of the captions were handwritten by Williams himself, whilst the rest of the book was assembled based upon his notes. So what is Adventures in Animation? The first thing to note is that this is not another guidebook like the Animator's Survival Kit. Instead, it's probably best classified as a memoir. The cover of the book actually sums it up very well. How I learned, who I learned from, and what I did with it. It is the story of how Richard Williams first found his way to animation, his memories of the great animators who became his mentors, and an account of the most significant projects which he created along the way. Many of these stories were touched upon within the Animator's Survival Kit, but this book dives into all of these subjects in far greater depth. The first third of the book is an account of Richard Williams' early life. By the age of 14, he was already making good money by creating advertising illustrations, despite the head of his high school art department telling him that he had no artistic talent whatsoever. Aged 15, and armed with a portfolio of drawings, Williams took a 2-month solo trip to California with the aim of visiting the Disney studio. They ultimately gave him a tour of the studio, where he met Walt Disney and a number of the top animators. It was here that he received life-changing advice from animator Dick Kelsey, who told him to learn to draw. Not the animation-style drawings that he'd been working on to that time, but really learn to draw. This sent Williams off to art school with an entirely different focus, one which no doubt had a significant impact on his later work. Following art school, he left Canada with a friend, with the aim of spending a year travelling Europe and touring the great art museums. This grand tour never happened, but it was whilst living and painting in Ibiza that Williams rediscovered animation. He said becoming involved in animation again was the turning point of my life. I realised that as an art form, it was absolutely on the cutting edge of my culture, even if it didn't have the prestige of fine art. It was a medium I could do something with, a product of today that I could take where other people hadn't gone. This desire to create something which hadn't been done before manifested itself in the half-hour philosophical short film, The Little Island. The book covers the production of this film in some detail, and it's safe to say that this was the project which launched his career. What's interesting to note here are the struggles which Williams endured to finance and distribute the film. These are things which are no longer the considerable barriers that they used to be. The fact that these hurdles had to be overcome, and that the film took 3.5 years to make, leaving Williams in a bad financial position, is a testament to the dedication which clearly drove him throughout his life. At this point, the book changes focus somewhat. What follows are a number of sections focusing on some of the animators who became Richard Williams' mentors over the years, alongside a spotted history of some of his major projects. Richard Williams had the opportunity to work with or learn from animators such as Ken Harris, Grim Natwick, Art Babbitt and Milt Kahl, all of whom feature in the book. Richard Williams was clearly driven by a pursuit of excellence, and in later years, a desire to share the knowledge he had attained. On reading these chapters of the book, it becomes clear just how those values were shaped, not only by his early years, but also by the various animation legends that he himself studied under. Milt Kahl was all about the pursuit of excellence. Williams states that he felt a strong connection with Milt because of what he stood for, excellence for its own sake, and sparing nothing in pursuit of it. Art Babbitt, on the other hand, loved to teach, and wanted to leave a legacy through sharing techniques, mechanics, and an inspiration for the future of what to strive for. Throughout much of his career, Alongside all of his commercial work, Richard Williams was also working on a film called The Thief and the Cobbler. All told, Williams dedicated over 20 years to this masterpiece, which he saw as a culmination of his life's work. Sadly, this project was never to be completed, and it's at this point that the story is taken over by Imogen Sutton. Starting with the story of the loss of the thief and the cobbler, the final third of the book explores what happened next. After leaving London and moving to Canada, the idea was formed to create a multi-day animation masterclass, passing on the vast knowledge that Williams had accumulated over the years. These masterclasses ran for a number of years, before the decision was made to turn them into a book. That itself became a multi-year project, before, in 2001, the Animated Survival Kit was finally published. The next step was to create an animated version, and, based upon one of the original masterclasses, recorded at Blue Sky Studios, a DVD box set was created, featuring over 400 animated examples, and a title sequence, which by itself took 9 months to animate. In his later years, Williams used to joke about the working title of his latest project being Will I Live to Finish This? In typical Richard Williams style, this was a mammoth project, an animated version of the Greek play Lysistrata by Aristophanes, animated alone as one continuous shot using pencil and paper. The size of the project concerned his wife, who suggested he split the film into chapters, thereby creating multiple short films. The first of these, a 6-minute film called Prologue, was released in 2015 and is an astonishing piece of work, which earned him another Oscar nomination. Sadly, the rest of the film was never to be, with 6 minutes of the next 10-minute film completed before his death in 2019. So is this a book I would recommend? Adventures in Animation covers far more than I've touched upon in this brief summary. But if you read the Animated Survival Kit simply as a guidebook and are looking for more of the same, aside from a few morsels, this isn't the book for you. Instead, if you're someone who read the various anecdotes in the Animated Survival Kit about how Williams learnt his craft and felt intrigued to know more, this book fills in many of those blanks. To be honest, I still came away from the book with even more questions, and had Williams still been around to write it, I'm sure there would have been more than enough material for a further Adventures in Animation. Sadly, this isn't to be, but I for one am happy to have gained this extra, unexpected glimpse into what made Richard Williams the animator and director that he was. Whilst I've called Adventures in Animation a book by Richard Williams, credit must also definitely go to Imogen Sutton, who was left with the unenviable job of completing this project. It can't have been an easy task, but the result is a fitting tribute to a highly dedicated and talented man. In my video about the Animated Survival Kit, I ended by saying that learning about Richard Williams' approach to studying animation, his constant pursuit of mastery, was one of the most valuable lessons in the book. It should come as no surprise then that Adventures in Animation, a book which dives far deeper into exactly those topics, will be finding a permanent home on my bookshelf.